Jaya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Gaurachandra Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Gadadhar Jaya Srinivas Jaya Mukunda Vasudevi Jaya Haridas.
Hare Krishna. Jai Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. So we're continuing today. Welcome, audience, our series on every town and village, celebrating and deepening our understanding of Srila Prabhupada's own principles and strategies for spreading Krishna consciousness, and how they are rooted in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's own Leela of spreading Krishna consciousness. So today, I'm very, very happy to have with us His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj, an old friend from our New York days. We were just talking about Henry Street and New York. And although we're now in the same area today, but Maharaj normally is residing in New Zealand. As I understand, he's a GBC and leader of the yatra there and in other places, and so many services that I would rather ask the audience to look at the bios in our descriptions than take our time to go through it all. And welcome you to this series, and tell us about your topic, Compassion Without Limits.
Yes, I decided to approach this topic via Vasudev Dutt. He always intrigued me unlimitedly, although I'm limited. Why? Because actually the description in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is inconceivable, and Prabhupada's purports bring that out. That Vasudev Dutt's desire to free all living entities in the universe, and he'll take the suffering on his head. This is beyond any kind of religious sentiment or attempt at philanthropy and humanitarianism. This is, but we'll get into it as we proceed.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I every year on the parikrama, I try to present that pastime as in a dramatic form, and it never fails to move me to tears practically. But I try to play Gauranga, and I've found different devotees to try to bring that out, and the interaction just says, "This is incredible."
Mm-hmm. So we can begin with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu glorifying his devotees, as always. And the description Kaviraj Goswami often gives is as if with hundreds of mouths. In the case of Vasudev Dutt, thousands of mouths. Oh, how my heart yearns to learn how to just glorify devotees with one mouth. It is part of Chaitanya Leela, this ability to relish the association and abilities and qualities of devotees and to glorify the devotees for those. And so that's how this description of Vasudev Dutt begins. Now let's give some quick background. According to Gaura Ganadesh Deepika by Kavi Karnapur, Vasudev Dutt and Mukunda Dutt in Krishna Leela are two singers named Madhuvrat and Madhukanta. Mm-hmm. So they've appeared in Gaur Leela as Mukunda Dutt and Vasudev Dutt, and somehow or other, in a transcendental way, Mahaprabhu said, well, actually, I get more joy from Vasudev Dutt than Mukunda Dutt. You have to be careful now and not make material gradations. Yeah. This is just Mahaprabhu. This is all on the platform of ecstatic love. So we need to be careful. So after glorifying Vasudev Dutt, after Mahaprabhu glorified him, you get some immediate insight into Vasudev Dutt's personality. He becomes very embarrassed and very shy. But he seizes the occasion to make an extraordinary request to Mahaprabhu. He, first of all, he points out the attributes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu before making his petition. This is how to be smart in bhakti. When you're about to ask for something, you first point out how the person you're asking or making a request of is able to fulfill the request.
Yeah.
So he says, my dear Lord, we know, number one, you incarnate just to deliver all the conditioned souls. All right, we've got that established. Number two, you're able to do whatever you like because you're so merciful. Anything you want to execute will be done. Now he makes his request from his heart. And we're starting to get to the point where we can really feel the inconceivable bhakti of Vasudev Dutt start to overflow. He says, my heart breaks to see the suffering of the conditioned souls. What do I request of you? Now that I've spoken your attributes and your qualifications for fulfilling my request, I request you transfer the karma, all their karma, from their sinful life. He didn't say their good karma. Not the punya, but the papa. Put it all on me. I wonder, Pancharatna Prabhu, when you get to this point in your drama, how do you do it?
When I get to this point, I'm on my knees. I'm crying, embracing Vasudev. I can't. I'm just overwhelmed because it's overwhelming.
So you're playing Gauranga, embracing.
I'm playing Gauranga. I'm playing Gauranga.
On your knees.
And I'm on my knees. And the play goes like Vasudev begins and I'm standing because, this has all been, this is as you pointed out, this is a series of Mahaprabhu is glorifying the devotees who are about to leave back to Navadvip. And there's so many interactions. And then he's asking Shivananda to take care of Vasudev's finances because he gives all the money. And so it's all been light. And now it's overwhelming.
One point we should always note is that Vasudev Dutt, like, as we know, Advaita Acharya, like all the acharyas in our line, consider material existence to be a disease. We need to think about this because we may think that material existence is something that happens, and then within that material existence that happens, you get birth, death, disease, and old age. But actually, our preceptors consider the whole package of material existence to be a disease, bhava rog. You may recall Advaita Acharya, when appealing for the descent of Mahaprabhu, said, everywhere I see people, especially in the Navadvip area, doing pious activity and impious activity, but I don't see a trace of bhakti. And without even a trace of bhakti, you can't get rid of the material disease, bhava rog. Or you can look at bhava as what's becoming and unbecoming. This is a disease. So this gives us insight into how we can frame our own existence, as well as to get a deeper insight into the petition by Vasudev Dutt. Please finish their diseased material life. Let me suffer perpetually in a hellish condition, accepting all their sinful reactions. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada makes a comparison to personalities well known in the Western religious tradition. And he points out that Jesus Christ certainly relieved his followers from all sinful reactions. But Vasudev Dutt goes beyond that by saying, in other words, followers or not, believers or not, put it all on me. So we really need to think about this. I remember going to Sunday school as a little boy and learning Bible verses and thinking about what's going on here. I remember the Bible verse, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." But Vasudev Dutt never said, "Whosoever believeth in me," whosoever believes in Mahaprabhu. He said, everyone, and not simply human beings, but all living entities. Let their sinful reactions be upon me, and I'll perpetually stay in hell.
It's just so extraordinary.
So in the purport, Prabhupada describes Vasudev Dutt Thakur as universal love itself, universal love personified. And he wants to make the point known to us that what Vasudev Dutt is demonstrating is beyond any known conceptions of philanthropy, altruism, humanitarianism, sacrifice. So in an ecumenical way, Prabhupada gives credit that Lord Jesus Christ certainly finished the sinful reactions of his followers by his mercy. But there's a difference, and this is going back to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary also. Prabhupada's echoing that. There's a difference between finishing sinful reactions and finishing material existence. So we need to think about that, because you may have all your sinful reactions atoned for or forgiven, but what about the propensity to commit sinful activities? And of course, you
stay in the material world.
Yes. This is why in the 6th canto, not only do you have Pritchett Maharaj pointing out to Shukadeva Goswami, what's the use of atonement? What's the use of having your sinful reactions cleansed when you still, like an elephant taking its bath in the river, you'll get up on the shore and roll in the mud again. And this is also why the Yamadutas, in explaining themselves to the Vishnu Dutas, they say, actually, anyone in the material world will sooner or later encounter us. Not just those who are sinful today, but the way this universe works is that sooner or later you're going to trip up. And when you do, we'll be there for you. So this is...
We're laughing, but it's not a laughing matter, actually. I mean, that was Vasudev's mood. You know, he was serious.
Yes. He wanted to stop material existence for all living entities, not just stop their sinful reactions. And so Prabhupada tells us this is a significant difference between Vasudev Dutt and saviors known in the Western religious tradition. And so we go on to learn that Vasudev Dutt, his example, is not only unique within the world as we know it on Earth planet, but within the whole universe. So this is why I'm saying this whole cosmological scope of Vasudev Dutt is so mind astonishing. to try to there. I had some mic problems. Where did we leave off?
Astonishing how, Vasudev Dutt is so astonishing. That's the last thing I remember hearing in the universe. And yeah, that his that's what I remember. And then I stopped hearing. I was wondering if it was me or what.
There's no comparison.
No comparison.
This is what Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur want to establish. There is no comparison in the universe to Vasudeva Dutt and his genuine, straightforward desire to suffer perpetually in hell. This is not anything like what we know of. And this is why I've been always bewildered by such a proposal when I think about it. You can read Chaitanya Charitamrita and just breeze through this. Yeah. Let me suffer in hell perpetually. Let all the sins of living enemies be upon me. Okay, next page. Yeah, Vasudev Dutt ki jai. But when you think about it, at least my head starts to fracture. I'm thinking,
I have two questions about it. Maybe Maharaj, if you want to. The first one would be like, if I can see myself as just a kind of I'm going to be very compassionate, and I know, I'll say these words, and Mahaprabhu will say something like, "Oh no," what actually happens, and it's like already in my mind that I'm just going to put a show of being so compassionate by saying, like for example, I sing every day. I sing, Patita Pavana, Hetu Tomarvatar, Mosamo, Patita Prabhu Naha Pai Bayar. There's no one more fallen than me. I'm the most fallen. But I don't really believe that. I'm just kind of saying it. So that was my first. And then the second thing that I has come to me is this, because this is, compassion means that you're feeling, he feels the suffering, and he's expecting, but and this is just, me talking here, so you can, but he's expecting a joy, the joy of relieving others' suffering. That to him is more promising, and that he feels that if I can do this, I will experience such great joy in the aspect of relieving others' suffering. Have I thought anything there? I don't know.
Well, I'm just waiting. I want to make one point, and then I'm going to, because you played Gauranga in this drama, we're going to get to Gauranga's reaction, and I know you're going to really turn it on then. So one more point about Vasudeva Dutt's petition before we get to the cosmological answer by Mahaprabhu, which gives you some idea into how insignificant we are and how insignificant this universe is. Prabhupada, at the end of the purport, gives us insight, I would say, into Prabhupada as well as our predecessor Acharyas. He says that one who executes Mahaprabhu's mission must be considered eternally liberated. He's a transcendental person and does not belong to this material world. Such a devotee engaging in the deliverance of the total population is as magnanimous as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Such a personality factually represents Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because his heart is always filled with compassion for all conditioned souls. I've been thinking about this end of the purport for many years, and I take it as insight, a humble insight Prabhupada's giving into who he is, what his mission is, and how the extraordinary acharyas like Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, etc. Who are they? And for backup proof, Narottam Das Thakur is quoted, Gauranga Sangigane Nitya Siddha Korimane Sejaya Rajendra Sutta Pa. You get insight via Narottam Das Thakur into how these non-material personages enter into the material world with a mission of fulfilling the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then, getting some understanding of this, we look at Lord Chaitanya's reaction when he heard Vasudeva Dutt's statement. Mm-hmm. And the symptoms I meditate upon in Gauranga's response. And now that we have Pancharatna Prabhu here, who demonstrates those responses in drama, I certainly like to hear his presentation of it. I'll just go over the characteristics that I've always meditated on. Mahaprabhu's heart became very soft, number one. Tears flowed from his eyes. He began to tremble, and his voice was faltering when he spoke. So what, Pancharatna Prabhu, can you say about that?
I mean, hearing, because again, this is not an ordinary devotee. This Vasudeva Datta is not an ordinary person. When he says this, Mahaprabhu can't just think like, here's a devotee who's saying something nice to please me. No, he understands the heart of Vasudeva Datta, and he's overwhelmed because this is his heart. This is his heart, and he's seeing it in Vasudeva. That here is someone just has completely understood me and my heart. But now, because like he said, he's prefaced this appeal with the statements that you can do this. So Mahaprabhu is sort of, now he's on the spot, but his reaction is, as you can explain now, how he reacts, what he says.
For those who like the technical details, an interesting point comes up in Mahaprabhu's immediate response. He says, Sakshat Prahlad, you're an incarnation of Prahlad Maharaj. Now, those who get into the Vaishnava technicalities might say, well, wait a minute now. Kavi Kanapur says that Vasudeva Dutt is one of two singers in Braj Leela. And now we hear Mahaprabhu saying, Sakshat Prahlad, you are an incarnation of Prahlad. What's going on here? These kind of technicalities are dealt with in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. How one devotee can be infused with another devotee in various ways. I won't go into it now because it's a technicality. And those of you who are Brihad Bhagavatamrita fans, you can dive into those volumes and you'll find it. But for now, let's just take Mahaprabhu's words and think about them. Lord Krishna, it seems, has bestowed complete mercy upon you. There is no doubt about it. And now you heard Pancharatna Prabhu reiterating how Vasudeva Dutt, in prefacing his petition, described how Mahaprabhu is qualified to fulfill his petition, even before Vasudeva Dutt made the petition. And now Mahaprabhu is going to describe the qualifications of the devotee, especially of Vasudeva, who made the petition. He says, whatever a pure devotee wants from his master, Lord Krishna doubtlessly grants. Why? Because he has no other duty than to fulfill the desire of his devotees. So I'd like to point out some background information. We're dealing with desire here, and we've heard that Krishna has no other duty than to fulfill the desire of his devotees. In the Bhaktivedanta purports, at one place we learned that actually you can say that the material world exists because of the desires of the conditioned souls. That's looking at the purpose of the material world from that angle. It's existing only because of the faulty desires of the conditioned souls. Then looked at another way, we'll hear later in this history of Vasudeva that actually the material world exists only because of the desire of a devotee. In other words, we're going to hear that because the devotee can desire to liberate all living entities, therefore, at the will of the devotee, the material world can disappear. In other words, the living entities in the material world can go back to God because of the desire of the devotee. As Narottam Das Thakur says, Chariya Vaishnava Seva Nista Paye Chekeba. Who do you know who ever got out of the material world without the mercy of a Vaishnava? So we're going to hear Prabhupada explain that it's just the desire of the devotee that people stay in the material world or leave the material world. But then he says, ultimately, it's up to Krishna. Why? Because Krishna can make the whole material manifestation disappear if he wants to.
Yes, he can. He makes it and he can break it.
You remember in Prabhupada's famous prayers, Markine Bhagavat Dharma, upon landing in the USA, he says, Krishna, by your will, the conditioned souls entered Maya, so by your will, they can come out of Maya.
Yeah.
So Mahaprabhu goes on, if you, Vasudeva Dutt, desire the deliverance of all living entities within the universe, then all of them can be delivered even without your undergoing the tribulations of sinful activity. This is something that's this is an understanding that's becoming lost in today's so-called civilization, that sinful activity brings about tribulations. People are wondering, why war? Why economic collapses? Why psychological hardships? Why environmental catastrophes? This is because of these are tribulations of sinful activity. But we tend in our hip contemporary mindset that, well, yeah, I did this, I did that, this person did this, and this person did that. But then way over here, we have tribulations. So the connection between the two is becoming increasingly lost.
Yeah.
So now, in standing up for Krishna, Mahaprabhu is here going to stand up for Krishna. Krishna is not incapable, Vasudeva Dutt Prabhu. Krishna can do it. He doesn't need you to suffer the sinful reactions of other living entities. He is Sarva Bala. He possesses all potencies. So, on the one hand, you have Mahaprabhu just coping with Vasudeva Dutt's inconceivable petition and desire. On the other hand, Mahaprabhu is defending Krishna. Krishna can do it. Krishna can do it. You don't have to suffer. So I wonder in the drama how, because Pancharatna Prabhu is playing Garanga, how do you?
Yeah, it's like the solution. You know, the solution comes. Here's the dilemma: is how do we respond to this compassion of Vasudeva Datta? So the immediate response is like you pointed out. This shows who you are. This shows who you are. You're Prahlad, because Prahlad has his compassion is also understood in the Bhagavatam. But then he moves on to the solution. How do we simultaneously, because Mahaprabhu can't tolerate the idea that Vasudeva would actually suffer, and the solution comes. This is Krishna takes care. He's going to take care of it.
Now, before we continue with where Pancharatna Prabhu left off, I just want to harp upon this point about desire. It's very important in our understanding of our individual life and in the life of the universe and in the relationship between Krishna and his devotees. So Mahaprabhu says, whosoever welfare you desire immediately becomes a Vaishnava.
Yes. That is quite remarkable.
So then we get a verse from Brahma Samhita. Yes, Chinda Gopam, Atavendra Hope Sukarma. Bandhanurupa Balabhajana Matanoti. Praising Krishna. Lord Brahma is praising Krishna for regulating the sufferings and enjoyments due to karma. And Lord Brahma says he does this for everyone, whether you're Indra or a tiny insect. But more than that regulation of sufferings and enjoyments, that very personality of Godhead destroys the karmic reactions of one engaged in devotional service. I've checked the commentaries by Jiva Goswami and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and they're echoed by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his commentary, that karma is beginningless in that you'll never trace out the beginning. Anadi karma phale, babi babarna vajale, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in his song. So karma is beginningless because you can't trace the beginning, but it's not endless. It can be destroyed. So all the previous acharyas focus on this point. Beginningless, but not indestructible. It can be terminated. It can be destroyed. And they all say it's astonishing how Krishna handles the karma of his devotee. So we go ahead, and still the point about desire is coming up. Because of your honest desire, all living entities within the universe will be delivered. And that Krishna doesn't have to do anything for this to happen. In other words, you don't need to suffer, Vasudeva Dutt, and Krishna doesn't have to do anything for all this to transpire, for the deliverance of all living entities to happen. So then he gives a couple of examples. Mahaprabhu gives the examples. Number one, of the Udumbara tree, and number two, of a pot of mustard seeds floating on the causal ocean. So in case you don't know, I had to actually look it up. An Udumbara tree, of course, Pancharatna Prabhu spent a lot of time in India. He most likely knows the ordinary equivalent of an Udumbara tree. It's like a tree with cluster figs on it. And look at it online. They're just many little balls of figs.
We have one outside our house.
Oh, okay. Now, as far as millions of fruits on the Udumbara tree, I only speculate that Mahaprabhu was talking about an equivalent in the heavenly planets or something. You know, I don't know. So he says, just as there are millions of fruits on the Udumbara tree, you can just visualize them clustered. Millions of universes similarly float on the waters of the river Viraja. So if one of those millions of fruits that are clustered together on the tree, if one falls down and destroyed, the tree doesn't even notice it. It doesn't consider the loss. So this is how insignificant our universe is. What to speak of how insignificant our planet is, or our nation, or our community. So Mahaprabhu says, and we're getting such a fascinating cosmological insight. In the same way, if one universe is completely vacated, it's a very little thing for Krishna. He doesn't take it very seriously. Don't take it very seriously that a whole universe is vacated? We have a problem in one city on earth due to suffering of the human beings, and it's become vacated, and it's on the front page news, so to speak, top of the website. But Krishna, from his point of view, if one universe is vacated, it's such a little thing. Now, why is that? Mahaprabhu says you have to, in so many words, he's saying you have to take into account the spiritual world. And when you look at things from the viewpoint of the spiritual world, you see differently. Because, first of all, Ananta Aishvarya. The spiritual world means unlimited opulence. Krishna has that unlimited opulence. And there are the number of Vaikuntha planets you can't count. Yeah. Material energy is limited. The material energies, its universes are limited, but still you can't count them. But Vaikuntha is unlimited. What to speak of, you can't count the number of Vaikuntha planets. So Mahaprabhu is going to give another example. We've gone from the Udumbara tree now to mustard seeds. And I don't know how many of our audience have actually ever seen a mustard seed, unless you're a cook or you're in the kitchen while your wife is cooking, or while the husband is cooking, however it's done. You need to understand how tiny a mustard seed is and how potent this example is. How small would you say? Like
maybe a millimeter, maybe, or maybe less than a millimeter.
So think about the causal ocean, which is neutral. It's not affected by the modes of material nature. And Mahaprabhu was saying, think of a pot that's floating on that causal ocean, and that pot is filled with mustard seeds. If one little mustard seed happens to fall out of a pot of mustard seeds, it's no big deal. It's so insignificant an event. And he says, similarly, if one universe is lost, big deal for Krishna. It's not. This is, as they say, mind-blowing. And then to further dramatize the opulence of Krishna, which is considered Shat Aishvarya Pati. Krishna is the master, the Pati of the six opulences in full. Mahaprabhu gives the example of Kamadhenus, wish-fulfilling cows of the spiritual world. So if someone's got millions of Kamadhenus and happens to also have a she-goat in the herd of millions of Kamadhenus, wish-fulfilling cows, if the she-goat disappears, so what? What's the loss? Therefore, Mahaprabhu says, if the entire material energy is destroyed, what does Krishna lose? How's that for putting us in our place? when you reach this point in your drama as Gauranga, how do you do it, Pancharatna?
Well, by this time, I'm now getting quite animated, and there's a big audience. We do this at Vrindavan Das Thakur's Janmastan.
Oh, Mamagachi.
In Mamgachi, because Vasudev Datta's house or the site of his house is nearby, his deities are nearby. So we do it there. And by this time, there's a big audience, and we're just getting quite animated and building up to the climax, which is the liberation of everyone is foretold. So it's getting quite excited at that time.
One interesting point that Prabhupada points out in his purport is that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in analyzing and clarifying the preceding verses, says the meaning of these verses is simple, but the full impact, the full purport is a little difficult to understand. That's a good prompt for us to realize we need to contemplate and recontemplate these verses and purports, because although they seem to be, they are quite straightforward, but the full impact of Krishna, for example, saying, so what if the whole material energy disappears? Big deal. What to speak of if one universe goes?
It's also I mean, this drama has two sort of inconceivable qualities. The first inconceivable quality is the depth of compassion of Vasudeva Datta. But the other inconceivable quality is the extent of the material world and Krishna's relationship with this cycle of anadi karma, and how, like you said, the desire that the whole process is moving one side by the desire of the jivas to be in the material world, but on the other side, the desire of the devotees to bring them out.
Well, that brings us right to this purport, when we're dealing again with desire. So Prabhupada starts with the living entity coming under what he calls the jurisdiction of the material energy. When that happens, he is sent into one of the innumerable material universes created by the material energy to give a chance to conditioned souls to fulfill their desires in the material world. And so we go on, we go a little further ahead. Similarly, simply by the desire of a devotee, a conditioned soul can attain liberation and transcend the results of karma. So, since everyone can be liberated in this way, one may conclude, and I hinted at this in the beginning of our talk, one may conclude that it is according to the sweet will of the devotee whether the material world exists or does not exist.
That's very deep. You're taking us into some really deep waters here, Maharaj. See if we can swim.
Well, I'm relying on you all to hold me up in the waters. Ultimately, however, it is not the sweet will of the devotee, but the will of the Supreme Personality Godhead, who, if he so desires again, we're back to that concept, that reality, if he so desires, can completely annihilate the material creation. There's no loss on his part, just as the owner of millions of cows does not consider the loss of one she-goat. So how can that be? You're forced, you're pushed by these verses and purports to take into account the existence and glories of the spiritual world. And then you see the whole situation in perspective, because the material world constitutes only 1/4 of Krishna's creative energy. So, as Prabhupada concludes, if according to the desire of the devotee, the Lord completely destroys the creation, he is so opulent that he won't mind the loss. This is all this cosmological stuff of the material and spiritual worlds is mind fracturing.
Yeah,
So
I
let's
mean,
yeah.
when I do, because I do this play and I say these words, but in my mind I'm wondering, Krishna, you've created all of these worlds, and yes, okay, you don't mind the loss of one, but why, why have, if you, whose desire is manifesting here? Like you said, the desire, there's three desires that seem to be in this sort of relationship. There's the desire of the jivas, there's the desire of the devotees, and there's the desire of Krishna. And somehow all these desires, they manifest and interact in such a way that we get material worlds, but we can also lose them too. So it's desire and the flow of desire. So it becomes, at least when we do the play, I feel, I find myself kind of getting lost in this, mustard seed universes, and where am I? And then so I try to kind of bring myself. Okay, now I'm here with you, and we celebrate Prabhupada. That's how we end.
Yes, exactly my feelings. You get cosmologically lost in this presentation, and you see how powerful is desire. I really like the way you encapsulated the desire reality, the desire of the conditioned jivas, the desire of the devotees, and the desire of Krishna. It's all interacting. So as we understand the unlimited nature of Krishna's opulences in the spiritual world, and how for Krishna the material manifestation is so tiny and insignificant, still we're left with the inconceivable compassion of Vasudev Dutt, who, even though he's just dealing with one universe, still it's so unprecedented that he wants to take upon himself perpetually the suffering of all living entities and let them finish their material existence, not just finish the reactions to their sinful activities. So this really makes us think about our own existence. What am I? What am I doing here? Why am I breathing? Why am I bleeding? Why am I breeding? When we start to think about these questions in light of Vasudev Dutt Thakur's petition and Mahaprabhu's answer, when we start thinking about those existential questions in that light, we're swept away by the waves of the bhakti ocean. That's what happens to me when I finish this section. I'm just feeling just washed away by the waves of the bhakti ocean, the bhakti rasamrita sindhu. Yeah. And I'm sure by the time Pancharatna Prabhu finishes his drama, it's
a little exhausting, because there's so much power in this this interaction. There's the power of Vasudev Dutta's compassion. I mean, his compassion has the power to actually achieve. I mean, he's not presenting something that can't be done. He starts that off by saying, this can be done. The power is there. You have the power. I have the desire. Together, this can happen. And then Mahaprabhu's, his power and his powerful response is it's a very, very powerful interaction. It's a bit exhausting. So we jump off and start walking.
So I'd like to conclude with Mahaprabhu's reciting a verse, which is in Srimad Bhagavatam. And he says that, well, I like the way Srila Prabhupada does a take on it. He says in the purport to this Bhagavatam verses, which is from Prayers by the Personified Vedas, chapter 87 of the 10th canto, he writes that the conditioned soul is always fearful due to being controlled by the external potency. You might think of all the things you're afraid of. Getting COVID, or getting caught in an auto accident, or losing your spouse, or losing your children, or nuclear warfare, or climate catastrophes, on and on and on it goes. Getting old, and there's Alzheimer's and dementia and cancers. But we're cutting to the chase here by the mercy of Prabhupada. The conditioned soul is always fearful due to being controlled by the external potency.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the Kali Yuga tradition is, well, let nature act upon me. It's all part of life. But the real source of our fear is that we're under control of the external potency, which is an abnormal, weird situation. So he continues that, therefore, the conditioned soul should always pray to the Almighty Lord to conquer the external potency, Maya, so that she will no longer manifest her powers, which bind all living entities, moving and inert. Fear. This is how Narottam Das Thakur says to utilize fear in Krishna's service. You utilize anger by expressing displeasure at how people's opportunities for becoming devotees are being disrupted by demoniac influences, demoniac structures. How devotees are being hurt, endangered, offended. So that's the bhakti expression of anger. And then there's kama, Krishna karmarpane. You can use lust in Krishna's service by wanting to engage everything for Krishna's pleasure. But what about fear? Instead of being fearful due to being controlled by the external potency, you're fearful that I'll forget Krishna. I'll fall into Maya. Maya is so strong. So you pray to the Almighty Lord, please conquer the external potency, but she doesn't manifest her powers upon me. Now, especially I like in this closing note, I'd like you to take note of this last sentence by Srila Prabhupada. By praying in this way, one will become eligible to remain constantly in the association of the Lord, thus fulfilling the mission of going back home, back to Godhead. So sometimes we feel that it's just little old me, and I'm just praying to Krishna, help, don't let me fall into Maya. But what's the use of my insignificant prayers? But we hear now that by praying in this way, you'll become eligible to have Krishna's constant association. By praying to Krishna, please conquer the illusory energy for me. Don't let me fall under its influence. By praying in this way, that is your ticket to Krishna's constant association, and then you can fulfill the mission of your life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead.
Jai. Wow. What did I remember Srila Prabhupada once saying that there's one problem with us. We're not afraid of Maya.
Yes.
Be more afraid of Maya. and then pray, like you say, and there's another pastime I remember where just extraordinary lesson for us, where a devotee is observing Srila Prabhupada. I think it was in Los Angeles, and he's standing before the deities, and his hands are folded, and he appears to be mumbling, and the devotee later asks, it appears that you are offering some prayer, Prabhupada. So I'm praying that I should not fall into Maya.
Thank you. And by that prayer, you'll attain Krishna's eternal association and go back to that.
By approaching in that way, that's how he can see, how he can talk to Krishna, is by having that prayer in his heart. Hare Krishna. So if we can manifest that constant prayer.
So Pancharatra Guru, I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
The dialogue with you has been more than I could hope for.
It's so wonderful that it happens to be one of those topics that I also share a very deep interest, having to try to portray it on. Our dramas are all impromptu, so it's not like I've gone deep into it, but still, it's the first person that I did it with is our godbrother Tribangananda from the UK, and he just moved me to tears. He was so his expression was so deep.
Did you know that I was going to approach the topic of compassion via Vasudev Dutt? You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. Gopal Bhatta was, I wasn't fully briefed.
Well, I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to discuss this with you, who has put so much focus and concentration in presenting the drama. So I take it as Vasudev Dutt's mercy upon me in my next to last Mayapur.
Mercy on us all. We do have some questions here from Kadiravan Devi Dasi. I don't know if you know her, Kadiravan. Delivering a universe, living entities from sinful reactions in the material world. How does that interact with the desire's free will? The free will. Okay, here's a good question. We're here because we desire to be here, and if Krishna delivers us, then is that are we being captured? And then the next one: how can Krishna or his devotee deliver them if they don't want to be delivered yet?
Here's the parampara context to that kind of question. We are not independently possessing free will, as if here I am with my free will and that's the end of the context. No, our free will is tiny and it exists in the context of Krishna's control. Just like a little child, a 3-year-old child. You could say the little child is choosing this toy, that toy, to scream or to crawl, but it's all, the little child's behavior is all within the context of the home, and the child is not controlling the home. So yes, the child has minute independence, and you can really see that regarding a little infant. But the overpowering reality is that, hey, there's a lot outside your control, little kid. And so your minute independence is simply exhibited within a much bigger context of control, supervision, witnessing. So Krishna can do what he wants because we are his Shaktis. So even our independence and free will, that exists in relation to Krishna, not something that's an independent component in of itself. So your question is actually getting at the heart of one of our material problems, thinking that my free will and my independence is in of itself a component, a standalone component, as if like, I don't know if car engines still have spark plugs, but in the old days before everything went electronic, a car engine had a spark plug, but the spark plug that causes ignition is only a component of the whole engine. It only has meaning in the context of the whole engine. So in this way, you can understand, I hope, the answer to your question. And you're getting at a disease of the conditioned soul. And I always think about this. I always try to put myself under a microscope and say, look, do you think that your attempts for happiness, your attempts for choice and independence don't exist in a greater context of what Krishna wants?
Yeah.
What do you say, Pant?
Well, and you also have to bring in the desire of the devotees, because that trumps it. You know, when the devotee of the stature of Vasudev Dutt brings forth his desire, then Krishna, you know, that's going to overwhelm. That's like a flood that overwhelms everyone's free will, including Krishna. He said, I have to do this for Vasudev Dutt. So.
Well, I'll conclude with one example given by Srila Prabhupada. It's quite common in New Zealand, since Kadiravan Devi is from New Zealand. It happens all the time that there are no clouds in the sky, or there are big, nice, puffy white clouds signifying a beautiful day, and then rain comes. Yeah. And so you say, well, how can it's called a sun shower in ordinary speaking. So how can there be rain coming and there are no rain clouds in the sky? So Prabhupada gives that as an example that even though the conditioned soul may have no desire for Krishna, still the mercy comes. He said that is how Mahaprabhu operates. No desire, but still, just like the sun shower, it comes although there are no clouds in the sky. No cause. Causeless mercy.
Causeless mercy. Yes. Yes, that's the answer. Causeless mercy. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj. I hope that your travels are smooth and without any inconvenience, and that we see you again soon, either here in Mayapur or in New York City, or in Gitanagari, or probably not New Zealand right away, but for me at least. Anyway. Thank you, and thank you to the audience for being with us. And come again. We still have a few more days up until the 17th. We'll be continuing this series, and we invite you to tune in, see what you have missed also. And let's also end, Maharaj. I think it would be appropriate to also end with a prayer for our family in the Ukraine, and that they also receive the full mercy of the devotees. Let our desire be for their safety, and I should just give a little pitch. There is we just got this yesterday, so I can't put it on. Maybe you can, Anandashesh. There's a website called shareyour.care. Shareyour.care. And you can go there and you can find out how you can contribute to help take care of the devotees who are, their ultimate path back to Godhead is assured, but here in this world, they could use our help.
Please, I've traveled to almost every town and city in Ukraine over the course of the past 24 years. And yes, please keep those devotees in your thoughts, in your prayers, and whatever support you can give. They definitely need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you, everyone.
Jaya Jaya Shri Krishna